Let's take a look at the new Era 2 premium tank from the Season Pass, the CS-67 Szakal. Now this is a tier 11 from PC, and here on console it was ported into Era 2. It is very similar, but it does have some additional changes and buffs that were applied. And let's start off by looking at a brief overview of the vehicle stats. So starting with the gun, it does have a standard shell which is 8 PFSDS, and this has 395mm of penetration, so it's about middle of the pack for Era 2. It does also have a heat round, but these are not as effective within Cold War due to many of the vehicles having spaced armor, so it's not ideal to load these. It does have 500 alpha damage, which puts it on the higher end of Era 2 mediums for alpha, so it does allow the vehicle to trade fairly well. Now on the drawback to that, it does have fairly low DPM, coming in at 3,190. Looking at some of the gun performance stats, it does have a base accuracy of 0.36 with 2.3 seconds of aim time. That's a little bit on the lower performing end for Era 2 mediums. When considering the vehicle dispersion values for both the whole movement and whole traverse, those are each going to be 0.13, and for the turret traverse that is going to be 0.14. So that is definitely on the worst end for Era 2 vehicles, so this is definitely something to keep in mind when equipping the loadout for the vehicle. Now it does nicely come in with 8 degrees of gun depression, so it does give it a fair amount of flexibility, especially when compared to some of the other Eastern vehicle counterparts. Looking at the mobility of the vehicle, it does have the unique turbo mode function with it. So with the base top speed, it'll come out to 70.4 kilometers per hour. It has a nice power weight of 23.68. When you engage with the turbo mode, the top speed comes up to 85.4. It does have an also increased power to weight ratio. It is very noticeable in game. It doesn't have it listed on the stat sheet here, so I'm not sure exactly what that one might be. Now to cover the vehicle loadout and the configuration. Starting with the equipment, I do have gun rammer, improved ventilation, gun stabilizer, and additional grousers. Mainly you're going to absolutely want to run the rammer with the vertical stabilizer, and that'll leave the other two down a bit to your preference. I did play a handful of games with the turbocharger to help max out the power to weight ratio, which is definitely noticeable, especially in turbo mode. From a bit of trial and error going back and forth between turbocharger and the additional grousers, I ended up sticking with additional grousers, so you lose out just a little bit on that power to weight gain. But for the vehicle effective traversal rate, especially with the turbo mode, when you stack the grousers with the ventilation and then some of the perks, you're able to maximize more effectively the vehicle's effective traverse rate, which is absolutely going to be helpful at times when you're in turbo mode, especially when you're trying to ram or run down like a light tank, for example. And the ventilation a little bit too, just to help with the gun stats. This is a little bit of a struggle in those areas for this vehicle. Now as per consumables, it's going to be pretty standard. I have the enhanced repair kit, the enhanced med kit, along with the enhanced hole patch kit. And then for the ammo loadout, I do carry 45 rounds of the standard APFSDS. Do not carry any of the heat rounds, and then I do have 5 HE rounds. You're mainly just going to be using the APFSDS rounds. And then looking at the crew skill configuration, I have on born leader, off-road driving, running gun, clutch braking, fire safety training, supply conservation, snapshot, armor angling, and dynamic driving. So a couple key points stacking with the equipment with the clutch braking along with the off-road driving to help maximize mobility, especially the effective traversal rates. It's going to be very handy in times when you're using a vehicle in the turbo mode, having to maneuver. Fire safety training is definitely going to be more preferable because it does have, I believe it's front-mounted fuel tanks. Or might be transmission, it doesn't specify, but you have 2 blocks in the front here, so if anyone's shooting through the front side of the drive wheels, these will commonly get penned. Some of the side shots will go through 2 of the blocks, or it might be 2 blocks from the front to side, but with these being front mounted like a lot of Eastern tanks, these tend to be a lot more prone to fire. It doesn't have to knock it out, it's just the passing through of the module, which enacts the save and throw mechanics, so this is definitely a good one to run that on. And then touching back a bit with the gun handling performance, you're definitely going to be running running gun and snapshot to mitigate the gun handling dispersion values, as those were 13, 13, and 14 for the whole movements, and then the turret traverse respectively. And it's a bit of a preference, but dynamic driving for the times you're going to be able to ram lighter armored vehicles. Dynamic driving will definitely help, especially if you're kicking into the 85 top speed or up to near it. This could be swapped out for a couple different other skills, but I tend to prefer it just to kind of have it on vehicle. It's a bit of a fun factor on there as well. And just to do a quick view for the configured stats for the vehicle with the Loadout, I'll just keep this up for a couple seconds here. And to quickly touch base on a vehicle's armor, it doesn't have all that much for thickness that's going to help you much. This is going to be much more reliant on the angles, so it does have a bit of a pike nose front here. The lower plate is about 90 mils if I recall. So not very strong for a plate, does have a decent angle to it, so you can get some bounces off of that. Now when it comes to ATGM protection, these space layers don't seem to really give you much protection on that. If you're ever going to be hit by an ATGM, unless it's a very extreme angle, you're very likely going to be pens. That is one thing to keep in mind as well. Alright, and for the first replace is going to be on Vineyards. And right off the bat showing the turbo mode and just how fast this vehicle can get up to and being able to take a key position early on in the game. And early on, nothing gets spotted up on the north side of the map, so it's pretty obvious most or all of their team is going to be on the south side, so there's quite a bit of easy cross shots to farm off from here. Just play it pretty casual from now. And a good example here showing the bloom and how wide it can get while in turbo mode. So coming out of that into the regular mode, you do have to be a little bit preemptive right before you're going to take a shot a lot of times. And here I'm able to use my gun depression to kind of peek in and out, not having to overexpose myself, so I am mostly hold down. I am kind of underneath up front, a little bit ahead of the team, but I do have some cover in the back, so I'm not necessarily overextended by any stretch. And gonna switch into turbo mode here to get underneath really quick, try to not take any damage as we do so. Do a little bottom move to dodge that right there. At this stage in the match, it's turning into a bit of a clockwise sweep. Our team's getting a little bit more dispersed than the other, so it's turning into a bit of a race to try to get these two tanks out so we can regroup. That way we can try to pull it back. A lot of times on Cold War, it kind of just turns into a bit of a lemming train that kind of tends to dictate the match a lot of times. Here we got a nice little green beam showcase showing how to properly ram with a paper medium tank. Definitely the best use of that high DPM.
союзника. Команда, внимание на квадрат. Броня пробита. Машина союзника уничтожена.
Now here it is a good position to hold out, and we do have, well, we had a bit of a cross, but since I'm being hit from the flank in this position, this is no longer going to be viable. So this is where I decided to go into turbo mode just to relocate and book it, and this is one of the best uses of the tank, being able to rapidly relocate due to that really high top speed and powered away. Fortunately for the green, being though he's not going to last this one.
Пробитие. Остались только мы. Не подведем команду.
Interesting choice of smoke on that BZT there. Got a bit lucky missing that. Mainly just relying on the fact that those are not the most accurate tanks in that range, trying to do a little bob and weave to make it a little bit harder to hit. Didn't get lucky there though.
Машина обездвижена.
Now for this game, I do believe I had power train on, or sorry, turbocharger and vents, so I did not have traction on. Now this is where, with this setup, the traversal's not bad. It's not quite as good as with the traction on. With traction and the turbo mode though, you can kind of maneuver these tanks a lot more easily. The gun is still going to be a bit derpy, but for engagements like this is definitely one of the preferences of running traction over turbocharger. Alright, the second game here is going to be on Cao Bang. This is going to be a little bit more of an aggro game, a little bit of YOLO-y stuff towards the end, but still a decent showcase of the turbo mechanic. Also showing another Szakal on that team, enemy team there. That is definitely why you want to run the fire perk, as this thing is a little bit more prone than most with catching fires, as you do have the transmissions on the front.
Броня не пробита. Пробитие.
So decent RAM there, not all that much. In these games, I did not have the RAM perk on. I did later equip it once I settled on keeping traction. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It is definitely a nice little thing to have that versus not having it if you're going to be ramming with this.
Уничтожен.
At this stage with this match, this is turning into a steamroll, so I'm being a bit YOLO-y here, doing a bit of dumb stuff, but just kind of trying to go in and get some damage for the game goes wrapped in. Missed a nice little ram there, but easy to pivot back and recover. This would have been a nice end to this game to catch a big light down, to pin him down with a ram and then damage him down, but we ended up getting a base cap, so that's the wrap for that match. So decent game on this one, nothing necessarily high for damage, but again it was a little bit of a steamroller. To give some concluding thoughts on the Szakal, pretty good tank, nothing superb or maybe not necessarily great depending on the preference there, but definitely a bit unique, fun to have, so pretty cheap to get it within the season pass, so with that in mind I would say this is definitely worth it, and this is probably one I'm going to try to mark as well. Well, that is the end of the review, so if you like it, if there's anything else you'd like to see or covered or change, leave a comment below, and I guess I'll see you in the next one.